Well, welcome everybody in whatever ways you are showing up. So nice to be with you all today. Hi, Anne. And great. Welcome, everyone. I think some people might still trickle in, but we'll get going. My name is Sonia Silbert, and I use she, her, and I live in Brattleboro, Vermont, which is on the southern border of Vermont. And I am co-director at 350 Vermont. And yeah, it's really nice to be here with you all. It's fun to get to engage with the 350 network that's across the country. A lot of folks are already introducing themselves in the chat, and it would be great if everyone else could find your way over there. You can and introduce yourself with your name and your pronoun, where you are located, an organization affiliation, if that seems important to you, including a 350 connection, if that feels important to you. It would be also great if you could rename yourself in whatever ways you want to be named by hovering your cursor over your face, and there's a little button with three dots there, and that's where you can rename yourself with your name and pronoun, just so we all know how to refer to you. And let's see, is anyone we're going to be using the chat a fair amount today. Is anyone not able to access the chat? Has anyone not found their way over there? Okay, great. So there's two folks on the call who are kind of going to be tech support and chat support and helpers in whatever ways. Shimona and Masada have both been part of coordinating this 350 network list of trainings. So if you've got any questions at all, they'll hopefully help out with answering any of that. Welcome those who are just joining us. Let's see. Yeah, welcome everyone who's just joining us. Please find your way to the chat and introduce yourself. Turn your video on if you're comfortable with that, and we can see your face. And I think we'll get started, and it looks like I can actually launch this poll, Shimona, so I can do that. So we're going to start with a quick poll about how comfortable are you with grassroots fundraising? It was supposed to be like a 1 through 5, 1 being I don't know where to start, and 5 being like I feel really comfortable. But it looks like the numbers aren't there. But I think you've got a sense of where they are in the order. So put yourself anywhere on there that feels right to you. "11 out of 13 of you have voted so far. I'm gonna give one more sec for the last 2 people to try and access that poll. All right. And here's the results. I mean, it's not a very large sample pool, but the majority of you don't know where to start, which is great because this training is a great place to start. And a few of you have a little bit more experience. So it's kind of spread out throughout. So we've got a little bit of a range. It seems like we've got some comfort levels and some experience, and some folks who are brand new. And let's talk about it all. And we'll see how far we can get, and hopefully we'll move everyone up a number or 2 by the end of our 2 hours together. All right, so I'm gonna start sharing my screen, and this is how I feel when we talk about grassroots fundraising, right? Everyone gets this like, yes, fundraising, this is what we're here for. This is why I got into this line of work. So hopefully that'll be the energy we bring today. So what we're talking about today is specifically grassroots fundraising. And how I'm defining grassroots fundraising is trying to get the money that you need from individuals as opposed to institutions, such as the government, such as corporations or businesses, such as foundations or grant giving organizations. So it's really focusing on soliciting money from individuals. And in some ways, this is not what people think of when they think about fundraising. Oftentimes, the first thing they think about is writing grants or getting government money or things like that. So my question for you all is, why do we want to do grassroots fundraising? What is the impact on our organizations? What's the impact on us as organizers and activists? Why do we want to do grassroots fundraising? And you should feel free to put things in the chat or in the, or you can just unmute, or a small enough group, you could just unmute and talk. But feel free to put things into the chat to start, if that's more comfortable.
Sonia, if people put stuff in the chat, can you read them to me so I could type them in here?
Yes.
Or Shimona can.
Yeah. It might be easier for you just to copy paste.
I just can't see both at the same time.
Okay, great. Well, we'll figure that out then. Basically what we're going to do is, as you all give some answers, Masada is going to scribe it into these chats, or sorry, into these slides. So what do folks think? Why do we want to do grassroots fundraising? To cover event costs. You get a personal buy-in from folks.
It creates interest among people, and then that could be shared. It's a lot more people than institutions out there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great, you're getting this too. Okay. Brings people into community one foot at a time. To be independent from big funders. You can put them in either box. The questions are the same, Masada. Sorry, I didn't specify that. Getting people literally invested. They may pay more attention now that they put some money in it. Mary Kay, what do you mean by costs money just to volunteer? Feel free to unmute yourself and talk if you'd like to.
I mean, I have credit card debt just for volunteering, so I always try to get grants and stuff just to reimburse myself for out-of-pocket costs.
Mm-hmm. Broadens base of support and increases engagement of members and volunteers. A few people have kind of said this. Liana, could you talk a little bit more about that? Get people literally invested in the cause. Why would asking people for money make them feel more invested?
I don't know. I just feel like when you put money into something, you kind of tend to pay more attention to what happens with it. So I feel like people who put money into a specific cause will be paying attention to it and may also be talking about it with their friends and family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a few people said this, that I guess, Luis, you were saying this a little bit of like, there's a lot more people out there than there are institutions, and when one person gives, they may ask their friends to give, and in a way that will make the impact greater. What about the impact on your organization's direction? Like, is there a difference? Does focusing on grassroots fundraising as opposed to applying for grants or other institutional funding, how do you think that would impact what kind of work you do as an organization? Do you think there'd be any difference if you, as an organization, are funded by individuals versus funded by foundations or by the government or by corporations? How would that impact the type of work you choose to do and the direction your organization goes? Feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah.
This is Patty in Eugene, Oregon. I think it made me think about pleasing the organization that I was trying to get the grant from more than I was trying to make an impact with grassroots organizing. And it just skewed how I felt and led the group. And I was really unhappy to be doing that. And I'm glad to be back grassroots organizing and fundraising with individuals.
So having that accountability to an institution rather than individuals made you think more about what they wanted you to do versus what you thought the work should be? Okay. Yeah, Luis, what were you going to say?
Yeah, basically that. If let's say I was trying to get some funding through this utility company that's local in Monterey. It didn't work out. They got really mad at me, like over the stuff that I was trying to do. You can just tell that, like if something that you want to do oversteps their business, then either the funding's gone, like just like nothing, or then you have someone to look over your shoulder, because now when I'm making events, like I had this meeting with them. And, I'm over here talking about defunding PG&E, which is my local utility. And they're tied in with them. Like they supply power, solar power, but they use PG&E's lines. So me talking about defunding PG&E hurt them because they're like, oh, well, we use their lines. So if you take their customers, then you're hurting us too. And they're like, oh, but, like first they told me off, the guy that I was talking to told me off. He's like, go get educated. You don't know anything. Okay, cool. And then this other lady's like, oh, well, just send us emails. Let us know what events you're going to do, where you're going to go and, set up a table or something. And we would love to come over. To me, that just sounded like, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing because I don't want you there. If you don't like what I'm doing, I don't need you calling the cops on me for, loitering or, something like that, something weird, something that I don't need to deal with. So, I mean, that's just a personal experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just chime in if I may. Seems like there are two big problems that can crop up. One is mission drift and creep as you try to chase the money and, meet the requirements and satisfy all the strings that end up being attached to money that comes from institutions and foundations. And the other is related to it. I'd call it mission corruption, where you are constrained from doing your mission to keep the money. Like, Louise was talking about, that seemed like a great story of that, or a sad story of that kind of problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, losing your purpose. Yeah, so grassroots fundraising enables you to have that kind of independence from funders that may have connections with the very institutions that we are trying to change or take down or reform or replace. This is a pretty good list right now of why we would want to do grassroots funding. Oh yeah, that's another great one, Annie. That the money is often more immediate. Instead of waiting to see if a grant comes through, a grant can take 6 months, 8 months to come through, as opposed to kind of calling a person. I think kind of like, just to riff off this idea of the independence from the big funders, for me, one of the big reasons why I love doing grassroots fundraising in particular is because, like it or not, we're in this capitalist society where money really makes a difference, and and in some ways it dictates who you're accountable to. If someone gives you money to do something, there is a very strong accountability relationship there. And I want to be really intentional about who I want to feel accountable to. Do I want to feel accountable to our government to foundations that are made up of really wealthy people, to businesses that may or may not have ties to some other institutions that I'm working towards or working on? Or do I want to feel accountable to a lot of individuals, to my base, to the people most directly impacted by the issues I'm talking about? That's as an organizer and as an activist, that's who I want to be accountable to. And putting energy into grassroots fundraising kind of institutionalizes that in your organization. That we as an organization are accountable to these 500 people as opposed to these two big funders. Another great point that Cindy just raised is that oftentimes grants want to be targeted for a specific program, and oftentimes individual contributions are what we call like for general use. You can use them for whatever is needed. And we know as organizations, there's a lot of stuff that is not the flashy rallies, right? There's a lot of overhead. You want to pay office rent. You need to print things. Ideally, we're paying humans for our time. And grassroots fundraising gives you so much more flexibility in how you use the money. Right. Yeah. I think one other reason that I haven't seen here yet is that focusing on flexibility of actions. From Kermit there. One other thing that I haven't seen here is that grassroots fundraising allows us to actually do leadership development with all of the people who we work with. So I feel like grant writing is this kind of like very particular thing. There's professionals who do it. You need to like know a lot. You need to be able to speak the fancy language. But focusing on grassroots fundraising, anyone can do grassroots fundraising, and everyone should be doing grassroots fundraising. So it's something that we can train our volunteers and our members and our staff members on. And that's part of leadership development. Those are skills that they're going to be able to use no matter what other work they go on to do. Great. Any last burning ones we want to add to this list together? This looks like a pretty good list of reasons why we should be doing grassroots fundraising. All right, so one reason why people are often one reason why people often don't want to do grassroots fundraising is because they think there's not that much money there to be found. And I'm here to tell you that there is some different opinions, or there's different facts around about who gives what in our country. So in 2019, the total amount of money that was given to nonprofits was almost $450 billion, which is a lot of money. First of all, that's a lot of money for a sector, for the nonprofit sector. And so when we're all like, oh, there's not enough money for our work, for our organization, like there's a lot of money being given out there, and we just got to figure out how to have a piece of the pie. And that money is broken into four main chunks. Individuals who give, bequests, which is people who leave money in their wills, foundations, and corporations. So this doesn't include government funding at all. So it's this $450 billion is not including government funding. So what I'd like to ask you all is, of these four topics and these kind of four pieces of the pie, which do you think matches with which? And you can either unmute yourself and answer, or you can just put it in the chat. Which do you think, which category goes with which percentage of the pie? I think individuals goes with the big chunk of the pie, huh? I'm gonna just move these over to whatever anyone says, but feel free for other people to chime in too, and I'll move them around again. Anyone else have an idea? requests are maybe at 5%. Anyone can disagree with individuals at 69? And where do folks think foundation goes? Request 17. Maybe foundations is 17, maybe corporations is 17, everyone's at 17. No one's going to dispute individuals at 69%. All right, last call for opinions. Feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself. All right, so the answers are individuals are they in fact make up 69% of that $450 billion that is given every year to nonprofits. Yeah, woohoo! Foundations make up 17% of what's given. Bequests make up 10%. And corporations make up this 5 little measly percent of the money that is given to nonprofits every year. So what do you notice about this pie? Any thoughts, reflections, ahas?
There's a lot more people.
Say that again?
There's a lot more people. So all those little donations add up to most of it.
Yep. Lots of little donations add up to a lot of money, and lots of big donations. There's a lot of major donors out there. Greedy corporations and generous people. Does corporations include sponsorship for the arts? So this is for any nonprofit. So if an art organization is a 501c3, they'd be counted in this. Yeah. So a few things to point out is like, yeah, individuals make up the lion's share. And these numbers have been tracked for a long, long time. The cool thing about doing fundraising is that there's a lot of money that's put into data collection of fundraising. So it's really easy to figure that, to see these things. So individuals have, for historically, always given the vast majority of donations in the US. This is actually the first year it's ever gone below 70%. And it's the first year corporations have been as high as 5%. The total number given keeps beating records every year, like it is going up and up and up. And some folks who are really into the fundraising world are saying that the reason why individuals is starting to go down and corporations starting to go up a little in terms of percentages, not in terms of amounts, but in terms of percentage of the total pie, is because of income inequality and how extreme that's getting in our country. So it's kind of an interesting data to track. Yes, there are definitely breakdowns for individuals by donation size ranges. I can send out a website where you can see as much data as you want, but you could also like really easily Google search nonprofit giving in 2019, and there's a lot of people who have broken this down in lots of different ways. One other thing I really like to point out about this chart is that bequests is 10%, which means that dead people are literally giving more money in our country than businesses are. So it's going back to like maybe greedy businesses. Also, having a small business is tough. Like I know there's a lot of generous small businesses in my community that give a lot to local groups, but it doesn't make up a huge amount of the percentages. Yeah, bequests are kind of an amazing, like out of the blue thing, and thinking about doing a planned giving campaign is a great idea for a lot of groups. Again, it won't pay off anytime in the near future, hopefully. The other thing is just that how often in organizations we focus so much on grant writing and getting money from foundations, because that can be like, oh, great, I wrote a grant and I got $20,000 or $50,000, as opposed to I called like, 50 people and I got $500. But it doesn't actually add up to that much. And I think it's important to have a balance in your organization so that you're not dependent on one fundraising strategy or another. But I think it's important to point out that foundations are a place where people with a lot of wealth are able to do what they want with the money without paying taxes on it. And if they were not putting their money into a foundation, it would be taxed and would go into our government, which ideally, if our government did this, it would go to support needs in our community and social services and repairing the roads and supporting our local hospitals and things like that. So I think that I feel like often in the nonprofit world, we're like glamorizing foundations and focusing so much on them as like our super allies, and a lot of them are really fantastic and do provide a lot of support, both in money ways and in coalition work and training and professional development support as well. But just like kind of wanting to remember that like this is money that should belong to the people, and putting it into foundations is actually putting it into the hands of a few people who get to decide where that money gets dispersed to. There's been a lot of analysis of Trump's tax policy, and I don't know enough to be able to answer that question, but there's a lot of analysis out there. The last time I did this training, I had these numbers were from 2018. So when I went to get the new numbers, there was a lot out there that's written about the impact of his tax policy on donating. The one thing I will say is that what's nice about it is the total number has gone up of donating. So it hasn't stopped it as much as people were concerned it was going to, but there have been impacts, and you can definitely do some research on that. So I guess the other thing to note about this pie is that one thing we often say is like, oh, I don't know anyone with money. Everyone's broke. Everyone works for a nonprofit, or they like are working in a restaurant, or they've got 5 gigs and they're just doing the hustle. I don't know anyone who has money. I can't ask anyone. And one thing that comes out from this pie and from the research that we've done is that having money and giving money is not necessarily related. It means we don't need to rely on wealthy people to fund the work. It means we know the people that we need to know in order to fund our work. And there's been so many studies out there that prove over and over again that people with less income and less wealth overall give a higher percentage of their income and of their overall wealth than people with more money. So once again, thinking about who do we want to be accountable to and who do we want to be building relationships with, thinking about that as fundraising is a really important thing. There's been really great studies and stories that came out of the civil rights movement in the South in the 50s and 60s before groups in the North, like foundations and rich folks and a lot of Jewish communities started kind of paying attention and started funneling money down to the South. It was really grassroots funded by local Black poor communities in the South. And they were able to pay a lot of folks. They were able to do mutual aid with each other. So there's been a lot, and there's actually similar stories with Cesar Chavez and organizing farm workers along the West Coast, that a lot of these really powerful movements were originally funded by grassroots fundraising from people who had very little means. So there's a lot of reasons why people don't do grassroots fundraising. And I guess I just kind of want to name that a little bit, that there's a lot of reasons against grassroots fundraising. Does anyone want to like put a few or in the chat or name a few out loud? Like, why don't we all do grassroots fundraising if it's as easy as or as powerful as I was just saying it was?
The fear of rejection, the fear of what are your friends gonna say, or oh, he's asking me for money, I don't want to talk to that person, like
don't want to ask people for money. More labor intensive, or perceived to be. Some of those grant reports are, poke your eye out, but yes, more labor intensive. What are other reasons? Our community is tapped out, right? Yeah, like all of us are burnt out and tapped out. We just had a really intense election that is still going on. We've all been we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We're in the middle of a climate catastrophe that is impacting all of us. Yeah, we get a lot of asks. What else? Yeah, thank you, Kermit. Wealthy folks may not actually be excited about supporting something that will make them lose their privilege. Yeah, you don't know where to start with grassroots fundraising. Yeah. So yes, there's lots of reasons not to. We started with saying that it's kind of awkward to ask friends for money. Does anyone else feel that? But it's just scary to ask people for money. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nods. So I think that one of the biggest reasons that people don't do grassroots fundraising, there's lots of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is that we're afraid. And there's real reasons why we're afraid. And Shimona, did you get a chance to ask anyone, or should I ask folks to read something out loud?
I got someone for the first quote.
Okay,
Patty.
good. So we've got two quotes that we're just going to read out loud, and we have one person who I think was voluntold. And do you need a second person? And would anyone else be okay to read a quote out loud afterwards? Great. Luis raised his hand if you want to just chat him the stuff. So who's reading the first quote?
Patty. You're muted, Patty.
Here we go. The politics of money, taboo. The main purpose of the taboo about money is to maintain a capitalist system. If I can't ask for money, I will be shy about asking for a raise. If I can't ask someone at my workplace what they earn, or if it's not done to reveal my salary, or what they earn, or if it's not done to reveal my salary, I will not learn that I am paid more because I am white or less because I am a woman.
Luis? Oops, you're muted.
I'm sorry. What am I reading? I was.
I messaged you, Luis. It starts with in fact.
I'm looking for. Oh, okay. Sorry, I saw it in the alt chat, so I had no idea what the heck. I was like, what am I looking for? Okay. In fact, we don't know. In fact, we don't deal with money. Learn how it works and how to ask for it. We wind up collaborating with the very system our work is designed to change. Seeing our inability to ask for money in a more political context helps people overcome their anxiety about doing it. Next.
That's great. Thank you. And for those of you who like to read as opposed to listen, I just put it in the chat. So that's just a quick quote from Kim Klein's book, Fundraising in Times of Crisis. Kim Klein is kind of like the guru of grassroots fundraising in the US. She started an organization called the Grassroots Institute for Fundraising Training that for a long time did really amazing trainings and resources and had an awesome magazine that you can still get the archives from, that I still go back and like find articles to share with my organization or with my board. And this is a quote from one of her books, just talking about how money plays such a powerful role in our society. And when we follow that taboo of not talking about it with our friends, with our colleagues, with our family, we are propping up that power. And that not talking about it supports those systems that we're fighting in our work. And that there are ways that we can change that. And part of the ways that we change that is through the work that we're doing, right? Of like trying to dismantle systems of oppression and power structures. And one of those ways can be through grassroots fundraising. And the way we do fundraising is actually a way that we can meet the goals of our organization. And I always used to have this like really fun metaphor about Harry Potter, and now that feels really crappy because J.K. Rowling has come out as this intense transphobic person. But I will say, I think the values of the Harry Potter books still hold true, and that there is something, there's a fun metaphor about how people were really afraid of naming Voldemort throughout that whole series. And they were so afraid of saying his name because it like built like because of the that scary mystique he had, and not naming it made him seem even more powerful. So I will encourage us all to be trans allied members of Dumbledore's army and like name the scary thing and make it something that is something that all of us have power over. All right, that's my lecture on on the power of talking about money. I think we're the next, like the rest of our time together, this first part was a little bit more about like why grassroots fundraising, and the next part is more of the how. So I think before we move into the how, why don't we take a quick break and get some water, go pee, stretch your back, see the sunshine, and let's come back together at 10 minutes of the hour, 50 minutes past the hour, and we'll jump into like, okay, so how do we do it? Sound good? All right, see you in a few. All right, folks, if you are back, show us your pretty faces or say something in the chat or give it a little thumbs up or something in your from your reactions button. Hello, hello, hello. Great. Got some thumbs, got some waves, got some faces. Great. Thanks for letting me know folks are back. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again, and let's jump into like, how do we do it? Now that we've all decided it's like the coolest, most radical, most impactful, most empowering thing to do, what do we do? So you basically need 4 things for fundraising. One is a case or cause, something that you are raising money for, something that is important, something you're passionate about, something that is needed. 2 is you need prospective donors. You need someone to ask. And by the way, you'll be getting a copy of these slides afterwards. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. So number 2, you need someone who you can ask money from. You need somebody to ask. 3, you need someone to do the ask, someone who's willing to say, hey, will you do this? Will you donate? And finally, 4, you need systems to track the data. This can be an Excel sheet with name and how much they gave and what the date was, to very expensive, very fancy databases that will track every contact you've had with a donor and what they like to order at the coffee shop and what their favorite thank you gift is and everything like that. But you need some way to track it. You should keep track of who gives money to your organization. The biggest need of these 4 things is actually number 3, people to do the asking. That's also the thing, as we just talked about earlier, that is everyone's biggest fear. And that's kind of why I feel like we have to reframe what we're talking about when we're talking about grassroots fundraising, that people focus so much just on the ask. And it's not necessarily what grassroots fundraising is about. I would say grassroots fundraising is about relationships and about building relationships, which, as a side note, I would also say is what organizing is. So like, OMG, organizing and grassroots fundraising are really interconnected. Yay. So given that people are so afraid of asks, even though that's the biggest need, I want to introduce what's called the cycle of fundraising. And this again is something that you can get really detailed into, but this is a very basic cycle of fundraising where you start with identifying prospects, people who might be interested in donating to your organization. You cultivate to them and involve them, meaning you try and get them more engaged in your organization. You do an ask, you ask them for support, and then you thank them and you keep them updated and you try and involve them more deeply. And then it goes around and around again. Potentially, they might introduce you to other people who might be prospects, and then that you try and get them involved. And so, as you can see, the ask is actually like only 1/4 of the cycle. That's kind of where everyone's anxiety is. And not everyone has to be an asker. There's lots of other roles in these other parts of the fundraising cycle that can really help. And to be honest, it's actually not the most time consuming of this whole fundraising cycle. The ask is not the where most of your time goes, but it is where most of your anxiety goes. So just kind of like wanting to name that correlation. So the biggest underlying kind of theory behind this fundraising cycle to understand is that donors are not ATMs. They are human beings, and you should treat them as such. You should not only contact them when you want to ask for money, and they have feelings, and they have interests, and they have other ways that they can participate beyond giving money. So for every donor, you want to make sure that you do these other pieces and you're not just sitting on the asking for support. So what I'm wondering from you all is if you could give me an idea we'll walk through this. What are ways that you've seen or that you've experienced or that you've heard about ways that we do each one of these pieces of the fundraising cycle? So starting with identifying prospects, what are ways that people do that? What are ways that you've done that? And feel free to unmute yourself or go into the chat.
If you're asking family or friends, don't ask someone that you know is going through a hard time.
Okay, so I'll just ask, oops.
Are you doing this?
Yes, I'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll put first family and friends, and the advice of like knowing who's going through a hard time is an important one to keep there. Another one from Annie here is having a sign-up sheet at a march, right? So at participant lists. So here are two ways that people identify prospects. Thinking about their families and friends and looking at participant lists from their from marches or rallies or events. So what are ways that you cultivate and involve these potential donors, either that you've experienced maybe as a donor yourself or as an activist, or that you've seen other people do? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken as much. Any ideas? How do you cultivate? How do you get somebody more involved who you think may be interested in donating?
Well, this is Vern. I just put something in chat. I said for cultivating, building those relationships, you want to show how the work you're doing is meaningful and relevant to the person that you're talking to. Make it something that touches their agenda. And then give them opportunities besides giving money to get involved, because there's lots of people who have more time than money or have great ideas or whatever like that. And every contribution is a contribution.
Yeah, so invite them to get involved with the work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Patty wrote one-on-one meetings, which, as I'll say, what a great organizing tool, also good for fundraising. Okay, cool. So what are ways that you've seen people ask for support or that you've asked for support? On social media, great. So social media posts. What else? Looking at presentations. And one-on-ones, great. Oh my gosh, okay, you've got a lot more in here. Actually, Ms. Ida, will you put the rest of these here? And I'll go to the next one. Great, perfect. Through your listserv, everyone knows how to ask. Cool. All right, so Ms. Ida will put the rest of those asking for support ideas around here, if that's okay. And then finally, what are ways that you thank donors or that you've seen people thank donors? What are ways that you keep donors updated? What are ways that you involve them more deeply? What are some ideas for that section? Yep, thank you cards, donor appreciation events. Thank you cards, and inviting them to more events, like maybe a personalized invite to events. Annie, it sounds like is what you're talking about. Great. Donor appreciation events. Fantastic, great. So we just spent, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, very quickly brainstorming ideas for each section of this cycle. And we built the very beginnings of a fundraising plan, of a donor cultivation plan. This is an exercise that you could, great, yes, updating them on the impact of their donations, perfect, yeah. This is an exercise that you can do with your team, and you know, you can spend 20 minutes on it, or you could spend 2 hours on it and really flesh out what are all the various ways that you want to identify prospects. What are all of the ways we're going to cultivate and get them more involved? What are all the ways we're going to thank them and keep them updated? How are we going to ask for support? And spending that time, I think, can be very beneficial, and you get a lot of rewards for it, because having this kind of plan, having a fundraising plan in general, is the biggest predictor that you'll actually raise any money. And being intentional about the individuals that you're asking money from is because, you know, foundations in some ways it makes it easier. They've got a deadline, you have to get it in by then. Here's your report due, here's what we want to know. If you don't make this kind of plan, you'll just kind of never prioritize doing the donor cultivation work, which is really essential. Yeah, great. And thank you gifts, giving away trees. I love it. So I find just spending a little bit of time with my fundraising team talking about what do we want to do for each phase of the fundraising cycle is really, really beneficial. And it's also interesting to know which are the easy things for you all to think about. Oh, it's easy to come up with a lot of ideas for asking for support. Do we know all of the ways that we want to identify prospects, though? Great. So, okay, we'll try and get all the rest of these ideas in here so you have them in the slides to go on. So what I want to kind of jump to is in general, beyond just like in general cultivating donors, but specifically narrowing down on an appeal or a fundraising campaign in particular, which is what you kind of, which is what a lot of us are kind of doing between now and December 31st. So people refer to this as a fundraising campaign. They refer to an appeal, and what we mean when we talk about that is some kind of time-limited fundraising process with a specific amount of money, like a goal, using a lot of different channels. And most nonprofits do this at the end of the year because December 31st is the deadline to get a tax deduction on your for your donations. But a lot of organizations will do this at different times of the year, and they will create a time limited campaign. They'll say, okay, like by Earth Day, we're going to raise $2,000. We have 3 weeks to do it. Like, let's do this. And then at Earth Day, we're going to have this big presentation about everyone gets a free tree or whatever your thank you gift is going to be. So you can make a time limited campaign any time of year, though this is the time of year a lot of donors are thinking about where they want to give. The suggestion is to run it for 4 to 6 weeks tops. And having that limitation on your time gives you an amount of urgency. And you have to really capitalize that in your messaging and be able to explain really clearly and simply to folks, why now? Why should they donate now? It's not just because randomly it's Earth Day, but there's an opportunity right now. There is a crisis right now. Maybe the wildfires, maybe the pandemic, whatever is going on, like this is the moment that their donation will have a really big impact. And in an appeal, you want to ask people from multiple directions. And you named a few of them already in the fundraising cycle. Mailed letters or direct mail, sending out emails, both personalized and impersonal, social media posts, social media asks, phone banking, text banking, in-person asks, one-on-one, and events. So when you're thinking about that donation, that fundraising cycle, you want to make sure that you've talked to these people a few different times before you ask them, but also the more places where they're reminded about you, the more likely they are to give. So if they show up on their Facebook feed and they've gotten a phone call from you and they have a letter in the mail or a cute postcard with a picture of people in your programs, they're like, oh yeah, that organization is just everywhere. It's just really in the top of my mind. And then when you actually get them on the phone and they pick up and you're like, yes, I've been meaning to give to you. Can I give you my credit card right now? And you're going to say, yes, you can. So we're going to break you into small groups right now. You've been talked at for a lot so far today. We're going to give you, put you into small groups for I think about 10 minutes or so. And I want you to think about specifically moving into the end of the year campaign, fundraising campaign that a lot of us will be doing between now and December 31st. What are ways that you've been asked as a donor or that you've seen asks done at the end of the year? And as someone who has received them, what has been effective for you? So thinking about what are the ways you've been asked, you can think about all those different means that we'd said, like maybe you got a phone call, maybe you had a one-on-one meeting, things like that. And in terms of what's been effective, thinking about the format of it, like what's worked for you? Does it work for you to get a text or does it work for you to get a letter in the mail? Oftentimes that's a generational difference. Does it work for you to have a lot of great images? Does it look for you to have a really compelling story? Like what has been effective for you receiving those asks? So Shimona's going to split you up into small groups and you've got about 10 minutes to talk about those two questions, and then we'll come back and we'll fill out the slide together based on what you all discuss. Welcome back, everyone. I was just saying, you can always tell that people are like deep into conversation, they just get ripped out. All right, so let's hear, oh, great, Masada already put some notes in. We're gonna put all this stuff into the slide so folks can take this information with them afterwards. Masada, do you want to start from your group, since you already took such good notes, and kind of talk it out a little bit?
Sorry, didn't realize we got remuted. I took the notes, but other people mostly came up with the ideas. So maybe one of them would prefer to do it. I can put them in the list here. We only kind of answered the second question. Pierre or Patty, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do it. I think my first chime in was on the first one. I'd really like a little handwritten note on the ask. I like a letter in the mail kind of thing. I almost always will do more if I have a personal note on an ask that's written. Our particular group is putting in a color picture collage of all the fun things we did this year, because I think people like to appreciate the art, and they think that they're going to give money to do more of that kind of thing. And I think folks like that. It's harder to pitch the policy work, although when you have some successes, you should certainly try. Being really clear for what the money is going to. If you have a sexy project, and I gave the example of light projection on buildings right now with messages that people are over the moon about, because 2 people can go out and do it during COVID and get a big reaction and stick all that on social media. So I think, and that's an expensive thing that we are funding. So, and then Masada suggested, we don't really hear enough of the stories of how the money is used. We raise it and we ask people, but then you could have the young people who you raise money to do something for actually, have a time on a Zoom call to explain, how the money was used. And it seems like it's time well spent. Making it time bound with exclusive access, make it fun and more like a game. I don't have an example of that. If someone else in the group can do that. It was, I didn't catch exactly what was like a game. But, and then a good idea to give the donors pies, especially this time of year, which I'm definitely going to do because I have some fresh pumpkin right now. So
That's great.
that was mainly it.
Were there any examples from your group about making it fun, more like a game?
So I don't do it necessarily with San Diego 350, but for my day job, we, through our year-end campaign, have been trying to make it a little more fun than past years. And trying to make it time bound, since we have a lot of same donors who donate to us all the time, and we want to encourage them to not only donate for this campaign but donate multiple times. So we've had a couple events, and more virtual or smaller time events, and giveaways for when people donate and how they donate. So by amount and by when. So as an example, we gave one giveaway if someone donated a certain amount, that they get invited to a special donors only event that is going to be very small and limited in people. So it's not going to be something that they can't do. But those type of incentives we've done in order to make it a little more fun.
At San Diego 350, we hosted a trivia portion during our sustaining donor drive. So it was just like a fun way to lighten the mood. And it was about climate change and about like facts about our organization.
Oh, cool. How did you do the trip? Like, how did they ask the questions and answer them?
So we use this program called AHA Slides. It's kind of like Kahoot. So you could scan a QR code on your phone, and then you can just answer the questions on your phone. And it would also track the points for the people.
Cool. So like a trivia game. Great.
Mhm.
A fundraiser.
What is that on?
Sorry?
What was that on? Because that sounds pretty cool.
It was on AHA Slides. I can type it.
Yeah.
What is this fundraiser we're doing for a jigsaw puzzle? Like you win the puzzle at the end, or everybody donates and they get a piece, or what was that? Cindy, you want to unmute and tell us more about it?
That's me. So one of our members created a subway art puzzle, and we're selling the puzzles so it's pretty good. It's going to be a good fundraiser. And somebody set up a website for it, so it's specifically that way. So somebody has either and you could gamify it as well. So that's something you can definitely do.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, we had at 350 Vermont, we had a very beautiful piece of stained glass that someone had donated to us. That was like the world with flames and trees, and that was and that anyone who donated at a certain level or became a sustainer got entered into a raffle for that. Sounds similar. I would be so interested. So many groups have those thermometers of getting, like every donation gets you to the top. It'd be cool to have it be as a jigsaw puzzle instead, and that like putting it all together and it makes the whole work. Great. Well, thank you, that group. How about another group? What did you all talk about? I don't know who is in which group, so I can't call on you.
I can jump in. Anne and Brianna were in group with me, and one thing that seemed to emerge as a key was that it, regardless of what the appeal was in terms of how flashy it was or whatever media, if it had to be something that we were already passionate and concerned about, because there are all these appeals that are always coming in nowadays, whether it, especially the end of the year. And so that was one key. If it doesn't matter what they're doing to make it look like it's fun, or let's see, if it doesn't resonate with where we are currently focusing our passions and our concerns, it doesn't matter. Another thing that was that it would help us at least open the letter or open the email if in some way it was personalized. So like if it's a handwritten address on the envelope, it's like, okay, that somebody's taken a little more personal interest in this than just, you know, a mass-produced mass mailing. And if there's a note inside that's personalized, it's like, oh wait, I met that person at, or I heard that person talk at one of these monthly meetings. Again, it just kind of, so okay, they're taking time to talk to me, not just sending stuff out on a mass basis. An issue that came up, and I'm not sure if there's an easy answer to either of these questions that would address it, but something that makes fundraising appeals ineffective is when they are part of a deluge, or are part of just a swarm of a lot of, you know, if everybody is asking for money, like during the election campaigns, I mean, we all had stories about how it transitioned from, gee, this is something I'm concerned about, I want to help, to, why are they still badgering me? I have given, why are they telling me I haven't? And so I don't know if there's an easy fix for that. Like, how do we make our donation effective by avoiding that problem? But it's an issue to be aware of. And let's see, I'm just trying to see if there's something.
We were also
Yes.
saying, just to follow up on what Kermit just said, that if you're getting emails from different, or like 350 and 350 Vermont and the local branch and of the same thing, it's tricky. You know, there doesn't seem to be coordination sometimes, and you're getting it in several different ways from several different organizations.
Yeah.
So are there any, so when there is a deluge, and when there are other organizations working on similar topics or with similar names, are there ways that you think, like, are there things that have been effective for you in that context? Like, are there ways that an ask stands out? Or is it mostly, we've already said, having that personal touch?
Personal touch, I think, was the main thing. And again, it's like, I just have a very strong filter. If it's climate change, I'm more likely to engage it than if it's just about anything else. And so if I'm getting a flood that's running soup to nuts A to Z, I'll just let that stuff go in the trash, literally or figuratively, except for, you know, 350, Sierra Club, Citizens Climate Lobby, or, you know, my top concerns.
Yep. And Pam says that she doesn't normally answer calls from numbers not in her address book, and they don't usually leave a message. Pam, would you like them to leave a message? Are voicemails effective for you or not?
If it's a solicitation or a political call, I would rather they not leave a message, because my friends know how to reach me.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think there's one more group that hasn't shared yet. Is that true?
Yeah, me.
Great.
Oh, well, us.
You want to share what
So
you know?
it was a couple of things. One of them was if we're linked somehow, then it builds a little bit of trust, right? So like if we're with 350 and then there's a group, right? We got an email earlier this week about North Dakota. They're linked somehow to us, right? Like it wasn't just a random person. It was a random person, right? But to me, it was where I work. It was the people that I like want to fight with, right? So it didn't matter that his cause is something personal to his area. The fact that we're all linked together, that there's a little bit of trust right there, like behind it, that makes it appealing just on its own, because we believe that that person is only like affiliated because we fight for the same causes, that we want the same things. Some different place in the world, but it's all together. And another thing was doing small asks, right? Like, oh hey, we're asking people for $5-10, you know, not like leave it open, but you put a number in somebody's head, and then even if they can't do a lot, right? Like in their, oh, $5, yeah, like do you take cash? Like here's $5. Or if there's a small donate button on like Facebook, hey, click this for $3, click this, right? 350 has that, the $3. And that seems appealing because it doesn't hurt your pocket, and it's the cost of 2 burgers. You know, so little things like that that don't seem big at home, you know, join together, make a big difference. And then the
Sure. Oh, anyone else from this group that wants to chime in?
We spent a lot of time talking about relationship building as being an important part of the ask. And I put in chat that the local 350 groups are good with connecting to local concerns and issues. Like we've got an LNG plant right here in Tacoma, things like that. So the local groups are good. And then they're also good because the local people can respond to them as someone that they can relate to. It's not some headquarters out in Washington, D.C. And then the larger 350 organization, you know, if they can put a lot of emphasis on supporting and nurturing local groups and helping them grow, then they'll actually have a bigger payback, because it's the local groups, I think, just like you said about the grassroots, it's the local groups that'll get the most engaged people.
Great. Local students cycling around the area, knocking on doors to fundraise. Great, yeah. So one thing I haven't, so I definitely saw a very strong feeling from you all that the personal connection and personalized ask is really impactful for you all. I didn't hear you say a lot about like anything about the visuals or what it looks like besides having it stand out. And I didn't hear a lot about what the content should be besides stories of how the money is used. Were there anything in either of those 2 buckets that you wanted to add to this list before we move on? Anything that's really
bring
effective
pain.
What?
Sorry, was somebody else talking? I said, you know, if you bring pain to that person that you're talking to first, then it becomes personal in that moment, right? Like for me, when I'm out talking to people about why I do not like PG&E, I start with, hey, you know, like they haven't done the maintenance in their power lines. Their oldest ones are 108 years old. They're only good for 60 years. And in 2008, they burnt 900,000 acres of land in the campfire. You know, something very, very close to our hearts, right? Because we had orange skies for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Everyone around here in the area like knows how bad the fires are, right? California just, it's been terrible. So that's what I go for. I'm like, hey, you know, like most of it is caused directly by PG&E. This is what we're doing to fight them, right? Because then it becomes their fight because it's personal to them. They feel for it. They feel for the cause.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I heard two things there. One is there's all of these studies about how impactful storytelling is for testimony in front of legislators, for talking to friends and families, and for donating, that you can give people all of the data in the world and it really doesn't have an impact. It's like it's not gonna compute with the part of their brain that like makes them start to empathize. But the storytelling really does, of like, remember those orange skies, and here's the impact on people's lungs and things like that. Really focusing on the stories versus the data. The other piece is like, people are drawn to organizations that give that have an energy that they want to be a part of. And that so much of our world right now and our news is doom and gloom, and that's real, and we cannot pretend that's not happening. And Adrienne Marie Brown has a quote about saying that she has this feeling that in order for us to like really get to transformation, like our organizations and our movements need to be as pleasurable as possible. Like we need to give them that hope. We need to say like, we are doing something about that doom and gloom, like come join us. So two things I was just hearing were like focusing on a storytelling that ideally is something that's personal to them, and two is like explain what we are doing, like come join us, we are doing something, we're not just getting stuck in the doom and gloom. Yeah, I think I see a hand raised.
Yeah. On our storytelling, though, what we don't want to do is start out our letter. The first sentence is, little Amanda didn't know where her next meal was coming from, because I immediately think, yeah, there's somebody out there that's in a situation, but it's another gimme, it's another turn off. If, like what Luis said, if the story is targeted to the demographic that it relates to, so targeting your marketing to the area or the people that you want to reach, then that'll keep it more personal. But those little letters that I get in my mailbox that say, you know, think about all the poor dogs that are dying in cages or whatever, whatever that general asset, and you know that all they're doing is just trying to reach in and tug on your heart and get you to give. That's not what we mean by being personal. That's just being, you know, smarmy or something. I don't know.
Great, thank you. Great, thanks. Well, we can keep building this list, but I'm going to kind of go on to a few other pieces here, just to want to last thoughts on appeal. Just toss a few more things at you. One is to start early and think about what you can do ahead of time. You may not want to start asking until after Thanksgiving, say, or if you're doing an appeal the other time of year, you're like, oh, we can't start asking until June because there's a big event in my community in May, so we can't do anything. But there are things that you can do then. Think about what you can do ahead of time. Have all of your donors heard from you in the last few months before you ask. Have you entered all the lists from your recent events so that your email list is up to date? Have you thought about who has relationships, who on your board or who on your collective, who on your team has relationships with these people who are your potential donors, and having them like, oh, that's the person I'm going to ask on the call. Cleaning up your database and getting rid of people who haven't opened an email in 5 years or whatever. Like, you can do a lot of things ahead of time that will make it easier once it gets going. 2, I know there's a deluge and it's starting. My emails really started this week. I don't know if the rest of you did. I started getting those fundraising emails this week, and the deluge is going on, and there's actually a really good reason for it. 30% of all of the gifts in our country will happen next month. And even though you get zillions of emails those last 3 days of the year, and you're like, I can't pay attention to anything, there's a reason for it. You actually want to have an email from your people in those people's inbox those last 3 days of the year, because that's a lot of people giving. 10% of $450 billion is a lot of money that moves in those last 3 days of the year. 3 is that thinking about kind of what we just did a little bit about thinking about your experience as a donor and what works for you and what you don't like, right? Like you've seen the kind of smarmy, fancy, non-personalized fundraising stuff. We've all gotten it. What really works for you? You know your community the best. You know your members the best. You know your base the best. Assess what you're doing from a donor's point of view before you get going. And finally, that everyone can do something. I'm about to give you an appeal handout that is going to be like big and complicated and for like lots of different things that you can do between now and the end of the year. You don't have to do everything, but everyone can do one thing. Masada, can you do like a 30-second version of how you got involved in fundraising and how you got started?
Sure. Though it wasn't a year-end thing, just to be clear, but whatever. But I think it still applies. So San Diego 350 never had any fundraising for a long time. And at one point we had our steering committee, which was 4 people at the time, decide that we would all become monthly donors. And that then we would go and ask some of the other leading, core members in our group. So that's what we did. So the 4 of us became monthly donors, and then we each went and asked like 5 or 6 other people. And, within the space of just a few weeks, we went from having 0 monthly donors to having, I don't remember what it was, but 10 or 12 monthly donors. Not everybody said yes, but a lot of people did. And some of the people who said no to being a monthly donor still made a donation. And it made it really doable because we had just done it, and also because we were asking people who we knew were really invested in the work. So it was actually pretty easy asking. Is that good, Sonia?
That's perfect. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you. And I'm giving you a lot of ideas, and I don't want you to get too overwhelmed with them. I want you to pick 1 or 2 that you have the capacity to do between now and the end of the year. Masada said they were just like, we're going to just call these 20 people, and 10 of them are going to start donating. So being kind of simple. So Shimona put in the chat for an appeal planning worksheet. This is something that you can make a copy of and work with on your own. We're not going to go into it. It has like things for you just to like, what are we going to do between here, prep, our messaging,
Sonia?
our visual.
You're choppy for me. You might want to turn off your video. I don't know if that's true for other people.
Yeah. It was getting choppy for me too.
Sorry. Better? You never know. Things come and go in Vermont. Is this sounding okay?
Better, yeah.
So I was just saying, check out the worksheet on your own. We're not going to go into it today. It's a worthwhile exercise of thinking that before just kind of throwing stuff together and really real about what capacity you have. If the only thing you're going to do is call 10 people, that would be great. All right, so the last do together is we're going to talk about what the many ways of the many means that we have to ask people, what are most effective ways? And by most effective, I mean have a fair amount of amount of work. And so like 14 here. Just kind of looking at time. If we do pairs for 5 minutes, and I'm going to give you a version of this that you can make a copy of, or you can just look at the slide and try and rank 1 through I think 14. Which are the most effective ways to raise money, and which are the least effective ways, meaning that take a lot of work for not that much money at the end. You're probably not going to get through putting all 14 of these order, but think about top 3 in the 3 or something like that. So can we just toss them into pairs for like 5 or so?
Yep, I'm ready to go.
All right, so we'll a few minutes and just talk with your buddy about how to make these top 3 and bottom 3 most effective ways to raise money. All right, I'm gonna keep my video off in the hopes that that works. And I'm gonna give answers to your very quick little quiz. The most effective way to raise money from a donor. And if you want to, thank yourself and give yourself a point for everything that. But here is in order. And I'm going to just go over the first few and the bottom few. So the most effective way to raise money from a donor is a face-to-face request with a team of 2 askers. The second one is 1 asker. And then it goes on to a personal stationery, a personal phone call, personal form letter, or personal email, personal text, of course, a message. And then the bottom half involve in-person mass text or email or listserv, and personal form letter like your mail, and impersonal social media post, impersonal telemarketing call from someone whose phone number is not their address book, a fundraising special event, door-to-door canvassing, and then straightforward media or advertising. Least effective. So, what do we think? We'll do close or not so close? Shocked that fundraising is so low on the list. Pierre, you're not alone. That is often one of the things people are shocked by. Does anyone have an opinion about why it would be so?
Why it would be what?
Why would a fundraising event be so low on the list? Why is it number 11?
Is it because of COVID right now?
It is not because of COVID right now.
I would say it depends on what kind of fundraising event it is, because, if you have to pay $125 to go to the event so that they can spend the whole time asking you for more money, you're less likely to go. But, and I go to those. If it's an event where you go and maybe you have to pay for your meal, and then they have this big auction and it's a lot of fun, there's a lot of energy, and you get that energy of the room and everybody's donating $50, $100, $150, then it's like being at an auction, and all of a sudden you find yourself donating $100 more than you thought you would. So those can be very effective.
Yes, and that sounds like a fun event. I guess just since we're running low on time, I'll jump in that the reason the fundraising events are so low on the list is because it takes so much effort. It takes so much staff time or volunteer time to pull off an event, and often it takes a lot of money to pull off an event. You're renting venue, you're buying food, you're getting chair, you're getting decorations, I don't know, you're getting fancy shoes, whatever it is, and it doesn't make a ton of money. What fundraising events are so good for is building community and building relationships, getting people more involved. The other things, a new way to get people involved, new donors. So it's like the other part of the fundraising cycle, not necessarily asking for money and getting enough money. Okay, one other question about anything on anything surprised about? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
We pass the hat. We have monthly meetings and we pass the hat. Meaningful Movies does that here too. And up until coronavirus, we were self-funded just because we passed the hat. We got 20 or 30 people sitting around for a presentation and everybody puts in a buck or two. And sometimes we find $100 bills in the hat. It just kind of depends, So I don't see that one here. And it's been our modus operandi,
Yeah.
And I know Meaningful Movies does the same thing.
Yeah, I guess that is a good point. I guess that that like maybe that's
It's not,
kind of
it's
like
not formal
great-
fundraising, you know, but it works.
It is. It's grassroots fundraising. It sounds like what it maybe does is more of a break even, like you're spending money on an event and you're covering costs from to participate, as opposed to these that are like trying to raise enough money to pay for other organizing that's happening.
Yeah, we're not going to pay Grace's salary that way.
Yeah. So just one thing I want to point out about this list of most effective ways, effective way. This really underlines what you all said about your own experience as owners. It's basically a list of from personal to least personal. And really that's what's going on here. It is easy for us to put a post on our personal Facebook page and say like, hey, will people donating to this organization? And that's a very personal ask, and it's going to be you're not going to get a good return on necessarily. If you do a personal, even if you're doing it through social media, you do a personal Facebook message to someone like, listen, I know you really care about these issues. Will you join me in donating? And that's going to be a difference. The other thing I name is the difference between the number most effective and the number 2 most effective. A face-to-face request with a team of 2 askers is one asker. And given that, yeah, why would you think that the first one is more effective than the second? Given it's taking a little bit more energy and time from as a team.
It's like double the impact. 2 people talking about and giving their story rather than just one person.
Yeah, you can have 2 people with very different stories of an impact, right? You could have someone who's the organizer, someone who's from more of a directly impacted population, for instance.
And it might have the benefit. I'm sorry. It might have the benefit of defusing the awkwardness that people might feel just one-on-one. It's kind of like it's not all falling on one person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have that kind of buddy system. And Pia says it's harder to say no to 2 people. And all of those are part of the reason. And then one more part of the reason that, as I said, fundraising is so much about relationships and relationship building. And if you have some owners who you have regular face-to-face requests, you kind of want the relationship to be shared. If only one person on your organization goes and meets with that donor and has that one-on-one relationship, and then that one person leaves, you may not be able to continue that relationship. So making sure for your major donors that they've got institutional relationships with more person on your, and not just one individual. Okay, so it is. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to offer a thought regarding clarification between, say, efficiency and effectiveness. And it might be worth using an inefficient strategy. Like, for instance, you can send 1,000 emails with a mouse click and you're done in 5 seconds. And even if you get only 0.1%, you're getting some response. Whereas if you're doing 10 meetings with 2 people, that could take you days or weeks, and you may get a bigger response in terms of the percentage, but you may still only cover the same amount of money. I mean, hopefully it'd be much more, but anyway, I'm just wrestling with the distinction between efficiency and effectiveness and appropriateness of a given strategy. So, media and advertising is very low on the effectiveness list, but there's still a strategic place for it, and that needs to be thought through.
Yeah, and I don't think all of this goes into how much capacity do you have as an organization. I mean, Masada's story is that, you can spend a little bit of time and have that amount of impact. We could have chosen to spend an amount of time drafting e-blasts instead. And I think there's, what I'm encouraging you to think about is yes, how much time goes into the amount of into work. Also, like, what are you trying to build? Having the 15 people most involved in your organization, the sustaining donors, is going to have a larger impact the next 5 years because they're likely to continue building, bringing in other, donating and bringing their friends, you know. So really thinking about the amount of work that you can do and yeah, and what the impact can be over the long term.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and what they easier and harder for you. As I said, everyone has a role they can play in fundraising. Not everyone needs to ask. Some people are going to be fantastic at thanking. Got someone on our team who is just 100% on thank you notes. Like they raised much better than mother raised me for thank you notes. Yeah, and just what she excels at, and they're personal and they're fun and they're sweet. And that is her role in fundraising, and that's a great role to have someone play. It's a great role for board members or volunteers who are like a little afraid to ask, you know. So we're a little over time, so to close it out, just to take back and think back over all the things we've talked about why grassroots fundraising is powerful, how do we do it, the roles different people can play, fundraising cycle, thinking about appeal, thinking about what are the most effective and the most efficient ways. And one takeaway. What's one takeaway for today? One thing that you want to try and do for your organization between now and the end of the year. One thing you want to bring back to the team. And just put it in the chat. One takeaway for today.
Keep it personal.
Keep it personal. Great. Pies going on pies. Find ways to keep it interesting and personal. Great. Personal and fun. Any other takeaways? Something you're going to think about? Something you're going to wonder about? Just do something. Yes. The number one reason there's been all these surveys of donors, the number one reason why people donate is because they were asked. Not because they got the best letter, not because they got the cutest meme on their Facebook page, it's because they were asked. Just do something. Funny online, I'm seeing a few people with like their typing shoulders. Great. Grassroots fundraising versus foundations. Keeping it personal will empower, keep doing the work of the group. There's a place for everybody and for every strategy and tactic. I love it. All right. Any last takeaways that you want to get in here? Yeah, it's tough to volunteer to not being to fundraise, and it gives you a good too that you're not getting for this. Sometimes it's also difficult to raise money for your salary. Both are challenging in different ways. All right, so we've got an online evaluation that we want to share. We would love if you could fill it out. This is the last of a 4-part series, a 350 network of local groups. I believe we're thinking about doing it again in the new year. So we really appreciate your evaluation and any feedback you have. And Masada, anything else before we close out?
I'll just share the flyer with all the trainings because it also has a bunch of the resources, and it now includes a link to these slides that Sonia shared today. And Sonia, if you share other things, we can add them here. Okay, great. I think there's a few other things that I mentioned that I'll add to that to share out with you. Great, so thank you.
Yeah. We can get into the content from the other trainings if we miss them.
Yes, there's recordings, and we'll add the recording for this one when we have it.
Perfect.
Seattle folks have been kindly editing them. So, but the recordings and those slides from all the other trainings are up there. Also,
Thank
I'll just take this opportunity to say, I want to make sure we all thank Sonia for her time putting together this training and delivering it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I wish you all of the best in the fundraising work, and feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to geek out on stuff with anyone. But let's go for it and be the good version of Dumbledore's Army and move resources to do incredible work. So good luck, everyone. And now is the moment where everyone should feel to unmute at the same time and say, I really can, and loudly at the same time. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Really
everybody.
good.
It was
Thanks,
good to you.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye. Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving.
And happy fundraising.
Happy fundraising.